I'm Bree. They told me it was just a business investment, but then I discovered my sister's $200,000 dream wedding was funded with my inheritance money. Not a misunderstanding, not an accounting error, a calculated decision. They didn't even invite me to the ceremony. They said I wouldn't fit the aesthetic. When I confronted Samantha, she called me the family charity case and left for her honeymoon in Bali. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Have you ever felt like the foundation you built your life on was nothing but quicksand? Because that's what happened to me. I was finishing a shift at the hospital when the email arrived. Just a routine notification from my financial advisor. Quarterly statement available. I almost didn't open it. Between back-to-back surgeries and covering for another nurse, I was exhausted. The kind of bone-deep tired that makes even checking your phone feel like lifting weights. But something, intuition maybe, made me tap on that notification. The numbers didn't make sense at first. Where there should have been just over $650,000, the inheritance my grandfather left. Me with strict instructions to build something meaningful. There was less than half that amount. 317,452 to be exact. The statement showed a withdrawal of $200,000 just 6 weeks earlier. A withdrawal I never made. I called Rex, my financial advisor, immediately. His receptionist put me through right away, which should have been my first clue something was wrong. Rex never took calls after 4 p.m. Bree, he said, his voice cautious. I was going to call you tomorrow. I've been trying to get to the bottom of this. Bottom of what, Rex? There's $200,000 missing from my account. There was a pause, the kind that stretches into uncomfortable territory. The transfer was authorized, Bree. The paperwork has your signature on it. My signature? I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't authorized any transfers. I was standing in the hospital parking lot still in my scrubs, watching my world tilt sideways. Send me the paperwork. Now. My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. Too calm. Too controlled for the hurricane building inside me. The email arrived before I reached my car. There it was. A transfer authorization form with my signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, convincing even, but the B in Bree had that extra loop my real signature never includes. Someone had forged my signature, and I had a sickening feeling I knew exactly who. I drove straight to my parents' house. It was a Wednesday evening, which meant family dinner. A tradition I rarely missed despite my chaotic schedule at the hospital. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Samantha's new Range Rover parked in my usual spot, the one I'd been using, for Wednesday dinners for the past 5 years. Through the dining room window, I could see them all. Mom, Dad, my sister Samantha, and her fiancé George, laughing around the table. The scene looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. Perfect. Staged. A complete lie. I took a deep breath and walked in without knocking. The laughter stopped immediately. Bree! Mom's voice was too bright, too forced. We weren't expecting you. Tonight. I thought you were on shift. I switched with Nina. I didn't sit down. I need to talk about the $200,000 that disappeared from my inheritance account. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. George cleared his throat and studied the ceiling. But Samantha, my sister, just sipped her wine and raised an eyebrow. Maybe we should discuss this privately, Mom suggested, already standing. Why? I asked, still not moving from the doorway. Is there something the happy couple doesn't want to hear? George had the decency to look uncomfortable. Samantha did not. Fine, Dad said, putting down his fork. There's been a temporary reallocation of funds. It's all perfectly legal. Reallocation? The word tasted bitter. That's what you're calling theft now? It's not theft, Samantha finally spoke, rolling her eyes like we were arguing about borrowing a sweater. It's a family decision. The money is being put to better use than sitting in your account gathering dust. Better use? It's my inheritance. Grandpa left it to me. For something meaningful, Mom interjected softly. And what could be more meaningful than Samantha's wedding? It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. I looked at each of their faces, searching for some sign of remorse, some acknowledgement of the boundary they'd crossed. There was none. We've been planning this for months, Samantha continued, waving her hand dismissively. The venue at the Carlton is non-refundable. The deposits are paid. The invitations went out last week. Invitations? Something cold settled in my stomach. I didn't get an invitation. Another silence, heavier than the first. We had to be selective with the guest list, George finally offered, not meeting my eyes. The Carlton has strict capacity limits. Selective. I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. So selective that the person whose money is paying for the entire event didn't make the cut. It's not just about numbers, Samantha said, putting down her wine glass with deliberate care. It's about the aesthetic we're creating, the vibe. The vibe, I echoed, feeling something break inside me. And what vibe would be ruined by my presence? You know what I mean, Bree. You're always in those hospital scrubs or those baggy sweaters. You don't exactly scream, luxury wedding. We're having Vogue photographers there. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Her perfect highlights, her manicured nails, the diamond earrings that probably cost more than a nurse makes in a month. This was the person I'd shared a bedroom with for 16 years. The person I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, defended against bullies. You stole from me, I said simply. You forged my signature. You took money that Grandpa specifically left for me. Oh, please. Samantha rolled her eyes again. Grandpa would have wanted his money to be used for something spectacular, not whatever boring thing you'd eventually spend it on. A down payment on some suburban house? More nursing courses? Please. Samantha, Dad warned, but his tone lacked conviction. No, let's be honest for once, my sister continued, leaning forward. We all know Bree's the responsible one, the sensible one. The family charity case who needs to be taken care of. That's why Grandpa left her the money in the first place, because she needed it more than I did. But I'm the one getting married at the Carlton. I'm the one who's going to be in Vogue. I'm the one who actually knows how to use an opportunity, like this. Charity case. The words hit like a physical blow. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something, to defend me, to acknowledge how wrong this was. Mom stared at her plate. Dad adjusted his glasses. We can discuss a repayment plan after the wedding, he finally offered, as if he were being generous. That's when I knew. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was the culmination of a lifetime of patterns I'd been too loyal to see. I was never the daughter they were proud of. I was the reliable one, the one who would understand, the one who would forgive. Not anymore. I turned to leave, but Samantha's voice stopped me at the door. Don't make this into one of your dramatic episodes, Bree. The money's spent, the wedding's happening. You can either get on board or stay bitter, but nothing's changing. I looked back at her, at this stranger wearing my sister's face. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. Nothing's changing. You've always been exactly who you are. I just finally see it. I walked out, closing the door behind me with a soft click that felt more final than any slam could have. Back in my car, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Please don't do anything rash. We can work this out as a family. As a family. The irony wasn't lost. On me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I drove to my apartment on autopilot, the same route I'd taken hundreds of times, but tonight, everything looked different. Sharper. Clearer. Like I was seeing the world without a filter for the first time. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar silence, simple furniture, walls lined with bookshelves, the faint antiseptic smell that followed me home from the hospital no matter how many showers I took. I'd always found comfort in its orderliness, but tonight it felt like a reflection of how they saw me. Practical, basic, forgettable. I kicked off my shoes and opened my laptop. If they thought I was just going to accept this and move on, they didn't know me at all. First, I pulled up the forged authorization form Rex had sent. The signature looked convincing at a glance, but when I compared it to my actual signature on other documents, the differences were obvious. The forgery was precise, calculated, not some hasty imitation. Someone had practiced. I opened a new document and began typing. Date, amount, document details. Next, I dug into my email archives, searching for any communication about my inheritance. Account. There was surprisingly little. Rex usually called with updates rather than emailing, something that had never struck me as odd until now. My phone rang. Dad. I let it go to voicemail, then Mom, then Samantha. I silenced it completely and continued my investigation. I remembered that Grandpa's will had specific language about my inheritance. He'd been explicit about its purpose. To my granddaughter Bree, who exemplifies the values of compassion and service that I hold dear, I leave the sum of $650,000 to build something meaningful that will further her commitment to helping others. Those words had moved me to tears at the reading of the will 3 years ago. Samantha had received a different bequest, Grandma's jewelry collection and a smaller cash amount. She'd been visibly displeased, making comments about how some people were always favored. I found my copy of the will in my filing cabinet and reread the relevant sections. There it was in black and white. The money was explicitly left to me, with no provisions for family redistribution or reallocation. My phone screen lit up with another text, this time from an unexpected source. Juliet, Samantha's maid of honor, and oldest friend. Heard what happened. Not everyone agrees with Sam. Call me if you want to talk. That was interesting. I hesitated, then texted back. What exactly did you hear? 3 dots appeared immediately. That they took your inheritance. For the wedding. That you weren't invited. That it's gotten out of hand. Out of hand was an understatement. I asked the question burning in my mind. How long has this been planned? The pause before her response felt significant. The wedding's been in planning. For 8 months. The money thing? I think that came up about 3 months ago when the budget got out of control. Sam was complaining that her portion of the inheritance wasn't enough. Her portion. As if my grandfather's wishes were irrelevant. As if my inheritance was actually a family fund that had been unfairly distributed. Do you know who signed my name? I asked. Another pause. No, but I know George has connections to people who fix problems. That's all I know. I thanked Juliet, surprised by her willingness to break ranks. Maybe not everyone in Samantha's circle was as morally flexible as she was. My investigation continued into the early morning hours. I pulled up bank statements, tracked the money transfer, documented everything. The picture that emerged was methodical, planned. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated. Around 3 a.m., exhausted but too wired to sleep, I checked my voicemail. 5 messages. Mom. Bree, honey, please call us back. We need to talk about this as a family. Your sister is under a lot of pressure with the wedding, and things got said that shouldn't have been. Call me back, please. Dad. This has gotten out of hand. Let's sit down tomorrow and figure out a solution that works for everyone. The money's just a temporary loan. Call me. Samantha. You're being dramatic as usual. It's not like you were using the money anyway. Call Dad and work out whatever repayment thing will make you feel better. I have enough stress without your meltdown. Rex. Bree, I need to speak with you urgently about your account. There are some irregularities I've just discovered. Please call first thing in the morning. Samantha again. By the way, if you're thinking of making legal trouble, don't bother. Dad's name is on the account too, as executor. It's all perfectly legal. Just thought you should know before you embarrass yourself. That last message sent me back to my paperwork. She was partially right. Dad had been named as executor of Grandpa's estate, but the inheritance account had been transferred to my sole ownership once the estate was settled. I had the documents to prove it. I checked my emails one more time, before trying to sleep, and found a new message from Rex, time-stamped 1:47 a.m. Bree, I've been reviewing the authorization for the transfer from your account. While the document appears legitimate at first glance, there are inconsistencies that concern me. I should have caught these earlier. I've initiated an internal investigation and frozen the remainder of your account to prevent any further unauthorized activity. Please call me immediately upon receiving this. So, Rex had finally grown a spine. Good. I needed allies, and a financial advisor with a suddenly awakened conscience was better than nothing. I finally collapsed into bed as the first hints of dawn crept through my blinds. My mind was racing with plans, strategies, next steps. They thought I would fold, that I'd accept their family decision and move on. They thought I was predictable, reliable Bree who would ultimately forgive and forget. But as I drifted into an exhausted sleep, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. They had no idea who I really was, and they were about to find out. I woke to pounding on my door. Disoriented, I checked my phone, 2:17 p.m. I'd slept through half the day and missed the start of my shift. There were 7 missed calls from the hospital, 3 from Rex, and a dozen more from my family. The pounding continued. Bree! I know you're in there! Open up! Samantha. Of course! I dragged myself out of bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and opened the door without undoing the security chain. My sister stood in the hallway, immaculately, dressed in a cream pantsuit, not a hair out of place. The contrast between us couldn't have been more stark. Her, polished and put together. Me, rumpled and exhausted. You need to call off your attack dog, she said without preamble. What are you talking about? Your financial advisor. He's frozen. The remaining funds and is making ridiculous accusations. Dad's furious. I almost laughed. Good. Rex is doing his job finally. Samantha's perfectly made-up face contorted with anger. This isn't a game, Bree. Do you have any idea what you're doing? The Carlton requires the final payment next week. The Vogue team is already booked. We have guests flying in from Europe. None of that is my problem, I said, my voice steady. You stole from me, Samantha. You forged my signature. You committed fraud. It's not fraud when it's family, she snapped. Dad approved it. Dad doesn't have the authority to approve anything. The account is in my name. Look, she said, her tone shifting to something almost reasonable. I get that you're upset about not being invited. That was insensitive. We can add you to the guest list if that's what this is about. The audacity was breathtaking. This isn't about an invitation. This is about you stealing $200,000 from me and thinking you can get away with it. She rolled her eyes. You're being so dramatic. It's just money. Money you weren't even using. It's my money. Grandpa left it to me. Because he felt sorry for you, she exploded. Everyone knows the only reason he left you anything was because he pitied you. Poor Bree, always working so hard, never having any fun, never fitting in. The family charity case. There it was again. That phrase. But this time it didn't hurt. This time it just confirmed what I already knew. You actually believe that, don't you? I asked quietly. You really think Grandpa's Money was some sort of consolation prize because he pitied me. "Well, it certainly wasn't because you deserved it more than me," she said with absolute conviction. "I was always his favorite, and you know it. I did know it. Samantha had been everyone's favorite. The pretty one, the charming one, the one who could wrap adults around her finger with a smile. What she never understood was that Grandpa's inheritance wasn't about favoritism. It was about trust. He left me the money because he knew I would use it for something meaningful," I said. "Not for a one-day party to impress people who won't remember it a month later." Her face hardened. "The wedding is meaningful. It's the social event of the year. People will be talking about it for ages. People, maybe, not family, not the people who are supposed to matter." She waved a dismissive hand. "I don't have time for your little moral lessons. Either you call off your financial advisor or what?" I interrupted. "What exactly are you threatening me with, Samantha? More theft? More lies? More family dinners where everyone pretends what you're doing is okay?" For a moment, she seemed taken aback by my directness. The old Bree would have backed down by now, would have tried to find a compromise, a way to smooth things over. But I wasn't that person anymore. "This isn't going to end well for you," she said finally. "Dad's already talking to his lawyer. You're going to look like the jealous sister trying to ruin my wedding because you weren't invited. I have the forged document, Samantha. I have the will. I have Rex's statement about the unauthorized transfer. You really want to see how this plays out in court?" Her expression flickered. For the first time, I saw a crack in her confidence. "You wouldn't. Try me." We stared at each other through the gap in the door. Sisters by blood, strangers by choice. "Mom's upset," she said finally, switching tactics. "She's been crying all night. Is that what you want?" The guilt trip. Classic. Samantha. It had worked countless times before. The implication that I was hurting our mother, that I was the one causing problems, that if I just went along with things, everyone would be happy. "What I want," I said carefully, "is my money. Back. All of it. Today." She laughed, a brittle sound. "That's not possible. It's been spent, Bree. Deposits, vendors, the dress, the flowers. It's gone." "Then I guess I'll see you in court." I started to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the gap. "Wait. Just wait. Maybe we can work something out." I paused, suspicious. Samantha never compromised unless she had an angle. "Dad set aside some property in the Berkshires for my wedding gift," she said grudgingly. "It's worth about $180,000. Maybe he could sign that over to you instead." "The mountain cabin?" I asked, surprised. The family vacation property had been in our family for generations. Dad had always said it would stay in the family. "It needs work," she said dismissively. "And it's so remote. George and I would never use it. We're more Hamptons people." Of course they were. I considered the offer. The cabin had been Grandpa's favorite place. He'd taught me to fish there, to identify wildflowers, to appreciate the quiet of the forest. The idea of it belonging to Samantha and George, who would probably gut it and turn it into some rustic chic showcase, had always bothered me. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I need to see a legitimate offer in writing, and I'm not calling off Rex. The investigation continues." She withdrew her foot, her expression hardening again. "You have until tomorrow. After that, we do this Dad's way." As if on cue, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. "You should get that," Samantha said with a smirk. "He's been trying to reach you all morning." I let the call go to voicemail, maintaining eye contact with my sister the whole time. "Goodbye, Samantha." I closed the door firmly and leaned against it, heart pounding. Something had shifted inside me. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. I wouldn't be manipulated again. I wouldn't be the understanding one, the forgiving one, the one who sacrificed for family peace. It was time to fight back. After Samantha left, I finally listened to Dad's voicemail. His voice had that familiar, authoritative tone, the one he used when explaining how things would be. "Bree, this has gone far enough. You're upsetting your mother, creating unnecessary drama, and threatening your sister's wedding. I understand you're hurt about not being invited, but this reaction is disproportionate. The cabin offer is generous considering the circumstances. Call me back immediately so we can finalize this arrangement before more damage is done. Generous." As if offering me property that was already in the family to replace money that was legally mine was some grand gesture of goodwill. I didn't call him back. Instead, I called Rex. "Bree, thank God," he answered immediately. "I've been trying to reach you." "I know. I'm sorry. It's been a complicated day." "Your father came to my office this morning," he said, his voice tight. He was insistent that I unfreeze the accounts and drop the investigation. And I reminded him that I have a fiduciary duty to my client, you, not him. That's when he threatened to have me fired. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? He's golfing buddies with 3 members of the board. So yes, probably. Rex sighed. But that's not why I'm calling. I've completed my preliminary investigation, and Bree, there's more. More what? More transfers. Smaller amounts, spread over the past 2 years. Usually under $10,000, probably to avoid triggering automatic notifications. I sat down hard on my couch. How much? Another $125,000 approximately. The room seemed to tilt around me. That brought the total to $325,000, half of my inheritance. Gone without my knowledge. How did I not notice? I whispered. The statements were being diverted, Rex explained grimly. Your email address was changed in our system to one that looks almost identical to yours. The real statements were going to breestewart@agmail.com instead of bree.stewart@agmail.com. The level of calculation was staggering. This wasn't opportunistic. It was methodical, long-term fraud. I've documented everything, Rex continued. If you want to pursue this legally, you have a strong case. But Bree, you should know, your father has already engaged Stu Grayson. I recognized the name immediately. Stu Grayson was one of the most expensive lawyers in the city, known for representing wealthy clients in messy financial disputes. They're preparing to fight, I said. Yes, and they have resources. But they had made one crucial miscalculation. They thought I was alone. Thank you, Rex, for everything. Whatever happens with your job, I won't forget that you did the right thing. I'll send you all the documentation, he promised. And Bree, don't let them bully you into accepting less than you deserve. After hanging up, I called the hospital and explained that I had a family emergency. My supervisor, Edith, who had known me for years, didn't hesitate. Take the week, Bree. Your patients are covered. Handle what you need to handle. With that practical concern addressed, I made one more call to Juliet. I didn't expect to hear from you again so soon, she said when she answered. I need to understand something, I said. How long have you known about the money? She paused. I found out about a month ago. Samantha was drunk at her bachelorette weekend and bragging about how they'd been redirecting your inheritance for years. She thought it was hilarious that you never noticed. The casual cruelty of it made my chest tight. Years. Not just for the wedding. No, Juliet confirmed. The wedding was just the biggest single expense. There was also the down payment on her condo, the Range Rover, a couple of luxury vacations. Why are you telling me this? You're her best friend. Another pause. I used to think I knew who Samantha was. But the person she's become, I don't recognize her anymore. And what they're doing to you isn't right? They've offered me the family cabin as compensation, I said. It's worth less than what they took, but it's something. Don't take it, Juliet said immediately. That's a trap. What do you mean? The cabin isn't free and clear. George told me they refinanced it to pay for the honeymoon and some of the wedding extras. There's a $150,000 loan against it. My head was spinning. They weren't just offering me less than they'd taken. They were trying to offload a debt-burdened property to me. There's one more thing you should know, Juliet added hesitantly. The wedding? It's not even at the Carlton anymore. They canceled that venue last month when they found something more exclusive in the Hamptons. The Carlton deposit was refunded. Weeks ago. Every new revelation felt like another betrayal. They weren't just stealing from me. They were lying about where the money was going. Why are you helping me? I finally asked. You're risking your friendship with Samantha. What friendship? Juliet's voice was bitter. I'm just another prop to her now, another accessory for her perfect wedding photos. Besides, my grandfather and yours were friends. He wouldn't have wanted this. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, turning over everything I'd learned. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't a one-time, bad decision. It was years of calculated deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Please call us, Bree. The cabin offer expires tomorrow. We need to move forward as a family. As a family. The phrase that had always pulled me back, made me forgive, made me understand. Not this time. I opened my laptop and typed an email to Rex, copying the family lawyer who had handled Grandpa's will. I'm formally rejecting any offer of the Berkshire cabin property as compensation for the unauthorized transfers from my inheritance account. I am requesting full financial restitution of all funds taken without my authorization, currently totaling approximately $325,000 based on preliminary accounting. I am prepared to pursue all legal avenues necessary to recover these funds. I didn't hesitate before hitting send. Then I forwarded the email to my parents and Samantha with a simple addition. This is not negotiable. You have 48 hours to respond before I file a police report for fraud and forgery. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm. The path ahead would be difficult, possibly ugly, certainly painful. But it was clear, and it was mine. My phone immediately lit up with calls from both parents. I silenced it and went to take a long overdue shower. When I emerged, there were 3 voicemails and multiple texts, all with the same desperate tone. You don't understand what you're doing. You're going to regret this. We need to talk. But I did understand. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I understood perfectly, and I was done talking. The next morning, I woke to an email from Stu Grayson, my father's high-powered attorney. The subject line read, Stewart Family Matter, Confidential Settlement Offer. I opened it, braced for legal threats and intimidation. Instead, I found something unexpected. Ms. Stewart, my client, George Wilson, has authorized me to communicate. The following offer regarding the financial dispute between yourself and the Stewart family. Full restitution of $325,000 to be transferred to your account within 72 hours. A legally binding non-disclosure agreement regarding all aspects of this matter. Withdrawal of all claims and grievances, Mr. Wilson wishes to resolve this matter expeditiously before his wedding to Samantha Stewart. Please respond with your acceptance or contact me directly to discuss terms. Regards, Stuart Grayson, Esquire. I read it twice, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. George, not my father, not Samantha, was offering to pay me back, and he wanted my silence in return. Before I could process this development, my phone rang. Private number. Hello? Bree? It's George. Can we talk? I hesitated, then agreed. I'm listening. Not on the phone, he said quickly. In person. Somewhere. Public. Are you free for coffee in an hour? The Bluebird Cafe on Maple? I agreed, curiosity overriding caution. The Bluebird was busy when I arrived, morning commuters queuing for their caffeine fix. George sat in a corner booth, 2 coffee cups already on the table. He looked exhausted, the polished veneer I was used to seeing noticeably absent. "Thank you for coming," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "Your offer was unexpected," I replied, not touching the coffee he'd ordered for me. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from him before. "I want to be clear. Your family doesn't know I'm doing this. They think we're still fighting you." "Why would you go behind their backs? Behind Samantha's back?" George looked down at his coffee. "Because I can't start my marriage with this hanging over us. Because what they did was wrong. And because I have more to lose than anyone if this becomes public." "Meaning?" "I'm being considered for partner at my firm. Financial impropriety of any kind would end that immediately. Even being associated with it tangentially could damage my reputation." Self-interest. That made more sense than sudden moral awakening. "So you're buying my silence to protect your career?" He winced but didn't deny it. "I'm making things right, financially. The motivation shouldn't matter." "And Samantha? She's okay with this?" His expression tightened. "Samantha doesn't know. She can't know. You want me to take your money and pretend nothing happened. Let her think she won." "I want this resolved," he said firmly. "The money will be transferred from my personal accounts, not the wedding fund, not her accounts. As far as she'll know, you backed down under legal pressure." I leaned back, studying him. "You're starting your marriage with a lie. I'm protecting my future wife from consequences she's not prepared to face," he countered. He hesitated. "Samantha is complicated. She doesn't always understand boundaries. But I love her, and I don't want to see her family implode over this." "Her family already imploded. The moment they decided stealing from me was acceptable." George nodded slowly. "I know, and I should have intervened sooner. I suspected something wasn't right with the wedding financing, but I didn't ask the questions I should have." I considered his offer. The money would be returned, all of it. No protracted legal battle, no more family confrontations. I could walk away clean. But something felt unfinished. "I have conditions," I said finally. "Name them." "First, I want a formal letter from my father acknowledging what happened and apologizing. Not for legal purposes. He can state explicitly that it's not an admission of wrongdoing. But I want it in writing." George frowned. "He won't like that." "Second, I want my grandfather's fishing gear from the cabin. And his collection of first edition Hemingway books. They're still in the library there." "The books are valuable," George noted. "They were meant for me. Grandpa and I talked about them for years. Dad knows that." George nodded slowly. "What else?" "I want to be removed from all family financial matters going forward. Any joint accounts, any shared investments, anything. With my name attached to the Stewart family finances, I want out completely." "That's actually sensible," he said. "Anything else?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. I don't want the NDA to cover Juliet. I want to be able to maintain my friendship with her without restrictions." This clearly surprised him. "Juliet? Why would you—" His expression shifted as realization dawned. "She's been talking to you. She has principles," I said simply. "Something in short supply lately." He considered this, then nodded. "Fine. The NDA will exclude conversations with Juliet, provided she's not speaking to media or other public forums. One last thing," I added. "I want a copy of every financial document related to my accounts. Everything Rex has found. Everything your investigation turns up. I want to know exactly what happened, when it happened, and who was involved." George studied me for a long moment. "You're not what I expected, Bree." "What did you expect?" "Samantha always described you as pliable, easy to manage, the responsible one who could be counted on to keep the peace." I smiled without humor. I think we've all learned that people aren't always what their families think they are. He extended his hand across the table. Do we have a deal? I didn't take it immediately. Why do you think they did it? Really? George withdrew his hand, his expression thoughtful. Your father has been in financial trouble for years. Bad investments, declining business. Your mother's spending hasn't adjusted to their new reality. And Samantha, he sighed. Samantha believes she deserves a certain lifestyle. When reality doesn't match her expectations, she finds ways to bridge the gap. By stealing from me. By taking what she believes should have been hers in the first place, he corrected. In her mind, your grandfather's decision to leave you the bulk of his estate was a mistake that needed correcting. I absorbed this, the final piece clicking into place. This wasn't just about money or a wedding. It was about resentment that had festered for years, about entitlement, about a fundamental belief that I didn't deserve what I had. We have a deal, I said finally. But George, if any part of this agreement isn't fulfilled, exactly as promised, I'll go public with everything, and I'll make sure your firm knows exactly what kind of partner they're considering. He nodded, understanding the threat perfectly. The transfer will be initiated today. You'll have everything by the end of the week. I stood to leave, then paused. One question. Did you forge my signature? His expression remained carefully neutral. No. That was Samantha. She's always been good at creative solutions. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in days. The situation wasn't resolved yet, but for the first time, I could see a path forward that didn't require sacrificing my dignity or my future. My phone buzzed with a text as I reached my car. It was from Juliet. How did the meeting with George go? Call me. News traveled fast. I smiled and typed back. I think I just negotiated my freedom from the family charity case position. I'll call you tonight. True to his word, George initiated the transfer that same day. Rex confirmed it with a phone call that evening. $325,000 was pending deposit to my account. The paperwork George's lawyer had prepared was thorough. A settlement, agreement that made no admission of wrongdoing, but restored my financial position completely, an NDA with the Juliet exception I'd requested, and a formal separation of all family financial entanglements. What wasn't included yet was the letter from my father. He's resisting, George texted the next morning. Working on it. I wasn't surprised. An apology would require my father to acknowledge what he'd done, to put into words the betrayal he'd orchestrated. It would mean admitting, at least to himself, that he had violated not just my trust, but my grandfather's wishes. I spent the day organizing the documentation Rex had sent over. The picture it painted was even worse than I'd imagined. The first unauthorized withdrawal had happened just 3 months after Grandpa's death, a loan of $12,000 that was never repaid. From there, the amounts had gradually increased, becoming more frequent over the past year as the wedding plans expanded. Most disturbing were the email exchanges between my father and Samantha, discussing how to access more of the funds without alerting me. They referred to my inheritance as the family reserve, as if it had never been intended solely for me in the first place. My phone rang around noon. Mom. After days of avoiding their calls, I decided to answer. Bree? Oh, thank goodness. I've been so worried. Her voice had that fragile quality it always took on during family conflicts, a tremulous vulnerability that had always made me back down in the past. I'm fine, Mom. George told us about the settlement. I think it's for the best, don't you? To put this all behind us and move forward as a family? I closed my eyes, counting to 5 silently before responding. That depends on whether Dad intends to provide the letter I requested. Oh, honey. Her voice took on that cajoling tone I knew so well. Your father is having a very difficult time with this. His pride is hurt. Couldn't you just accept the financial settlement and let the rest go? For me? For me. How many times had she used those two words to make me compromise, to silence my objections, to smooth over conflicts that deserved to be addressed? No, Mom. The letter is non-negotiable. Bree, please be reasonable. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Samantha is stressed enough without this hanging over everything. Samantha stole from me for years, I said quietly. She forged my signature. She called me the family charity case. And you want me to worry about her stress? You know how she gets, Mom said, as if that explained everything. She doesn't always think before she acts. But she's your sister. Your only sister. And I'm her only sister. That didn't stop her from stealing from me and cutting me out of her wedding. About the wedding, Mom said, her voice brightening artificially. Now that things are being resolved, we'd love to add you to the guest list. It would mean so much to have the whole family there. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. You're inviting me to a wedding that was funded with money stolen from me. It would be a fresh start, she insisted. A chance to heal as a family. Family. Always family. As if the word itself was a magic spell that could erase betrayal, justify theft, excuse cruelty. I'll consider it when I receive Dad's letter, I said, knowing it was a diplomatic way of saying no. Not before. After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time, wondering if I had ever really known my family at all. The people I'd grown up with, shared holidays with, defended and supported. They seemed like strangers now. A text from Juliet interrupted my thoughts. Dinner tonight? My place, 7 p.m. I have updates. I accepted immediately, grateful for the distraction. Juliet's apartment was a cozy 2-bedroom in the Arts District, filled with eclectic furniture and walls covered in framed concert posters. When I arrived, she already had wine poured and takeout containers arranged on her coffee table. You look better, she observed as I settled onto her couch. Less shell-shocked. I feel better, I admitted. Knowing the money's being returned helps, but it's still... I trailed off, searching for the right word. Devastating? She suggested. Infuriating? A complete betrayal of everything family is supposed to stand for? I smiled weakly. All of the above. Well, I have news that might make you feel better. Or worse. I'm not sure. She topped off my wine glass. Samantha's experiencing some social consequences. What kind of consequences? 3 bridesmaids have dropped out in the last 2 days. Apparently, word has spread about how the wedding was funded, and people are uncomfortable being associated with it. I frowned. I haven't told anyone except you and Rex. I may have mentioned it to Paul, she admitted, referring to her boyfriend, who might have mentioned it to his sister Nina, who's dating the brother of one of the bridesmaids, Juliet. I didn't violate any confidentiality, she said quickly. The settlement isn't even finalized yet. This is just organic social consequences. People talk. I wasn't sure how to feel about this development. On one hand, there was a certain justice in Samantha facing some repercussions for her actions. On the other hand, I hadn't wanted to start a social war. There's more, Juliet continued. The Vogue photographer canceled. Apparently, they have a moral clause in their contract that allows them to withdraw if the event is associated with any legal or ethical issues. How did they even find out? Juliet looked slightly guilty. The photography world is small. Paul's cousin works for the agency. I shook my head, torn between dismay and a reluctant sense of satisfaction. I didn't ask for any of this. You didn't have to, Juliet said firmly. Samantha created this situation. Every consequence stems from her choices, not yours. As we ate, Juliet filled me in on more wedding drama. Vendors backing out, guests sending regrets, the venue suddenly having issues with their deposit structure. The wedding's imploding, she concluded, and Samantha is beside herself. She called me crying this morning, asking if I knew why people were abandoning her perfect day. What did you tell her? The truth. that actions have consequences, that people have lines they won't cross, even for friendship. Juliet looked at me directly. I also told her I wouldn't be standing up as her maid of honor unless she made things right with you. Completely. Right. I stared at her, surprised. You didn't have to do that. Actually, I did. For my own self-respect, if nothing else. She refilled our wine glasses. So, will you go to the wedding if they invite you properly? I had been asking myself the same question all day. I don't know. Part of me wants to see this through, to stand in that room and remind them that they didn't break me. But another part just wants to be done with all of it. Whatever you decide, I support you, Juliet said. But if you do come, wear something spectacular. I have a red Valentino that would make Samantha lose her mind. For the first time in days, I laughed. Genuinely. As the evening continued, I realized something surprising. In losing my family's loyalty, I had discovered what true friendship looked like. And maybe that was the more valuable treasure after all. 3 days before the wedding, with the money safely restored to my account and all legal documents signed, I still hadn't received my father's letter. I had begun to accept that it might never come, that his pride was more important to him than completing our agreement or acknowledging what he'd done. I was starting a night shift at the hospital when my phone buzzed with a text from George. Check your email. It's done. In the quiet of the break room, I opened my email and found a message from my father. The subject line was simply, letter. There was no text in the body, just an attachment. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for disappointment. A perfunctory note, a half-hearted acknowledgement, or worse, more justifications disguised as an apology. What I found instead left me speechless. Dear Bree, this is the hardest letter I've ever had to write. Not because the words are difficult to find, but because they require me to face truths about myself I've spent years avoiding. What I did, was wrong. Not just legally, or ethically wrong, but a profound betrayal of you as my daughter, and of your grandfather's trust in me to honor his wishes. The money was yours. It was never mine to reallocate or borrow. There is no family justification that makes what happened acceptable. I violated your trust and your rights for my own convenience and to avoid confronting difficult realities in our family. The truth is that our financial situation has been precarious for some time. Poor investments, coupled with a lifestyle we couldn't maintain, created pressure I didn't handle well. Instead of being honest, with you, with your mother, with Samantha, even with myself, I took the path of least resistance. Your inheritance was accessible, and you had always been understanding, always put family first. I exploited that quality. In you, the very quality I should have cherished and protected as your father. None of this excuses what happened. I am not asking for forgiveness, nor do I expect it. What I am doing is acknowledging, without reservation, that I failed you. That we all failed you. That the burden of being the responsible one in this family has always fallen unfairly on your shoulders, and instead of appreciating that strength, we took advantage of it. Samantha's behavior has been unconscionable, but I bear the greater responsibility. I enabled her sense of entitlement throughout her life. I reinforced the idea that her desires took precedence over others' rights. I modeled dishonesty as a solution to problems. As her father, I failed her too, though in a very different way. I understand now why the apology letter was so important to you. It's not just about words on paper. It's about finally being seen, having your reality acknowledged after being gaslit for so long. I'm sorry it took a legal agreement to make me face that truth. Your grandfather would be deeply disappointed in me, but immensely proud of you. Not just for your professional accomplishments or your compassion for others, but for your courage in standing up for yourself, even when that meant standing against your family. The strength that takes is something I'm only beginning to understand. The money has been returned, but the trust that's been broken cannot be so easily restored. Whether our relationship can heal from this is a question only time can answer. What I can tell you now is that I am profoundly sorry, not just for the financial betrayal, but for every time I've treated your boundaries as optional, your needs as secondary, and your love for this family as something to be exploited rather than cherished. With deep regret and genuine remorse, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, emotions washing over me in waves, shock at his candor, vindication that he finally understood, a deep sadness for what our relationship had been and what it might have been. And underneath it all, a surprising flicker of something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. Not hope that everything would magically be fixed. That fantasy had died the moment I discovered the theft. But hope that perhaps, in time, something new and healthier might be possible. Something built on truth rather than manipulation, on respect rather than exploitation. I wasn't ready to respond yet. The letter needed to settle, its weight and meaning absorbed fully before I could form a reply. Instead, I tucked my phone away and focused on my patience, finding comfort in the straightforward nature of my work. Clear problems, clear solutions, care given without conditions or hidden agendas. After my shift ended the next morning, I drove home through the quiet early streets, mind still circling around my father's words. When I reached my apartment building, I found Samantha sitting on the steps, wrapped in an expensive coat, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. She stood as I approached, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "You got Dad's letter?" she asked without preamble. I nodded, too tired for pleasantries. "What are you doing here, Samantha?" "I need to talk to you." She glanced at the building entrance. "Can we go inside?" I considered refusing, telling her I was exhausted after a 12-hour shift, that whatever she had to say could wait. But curiosity won out. My apartment felt strange with Samantha in it. She had visited only a handful of times over the years. Always, with an air of barely concealed disdain for my modest living situation. Now she perched awkwardly on my couch, looking out of place in her designer clothes against my well-worn furniture. "The wedding's falling apart," she said bluntly. The wedding party has dropped out. The venue is threatening to cancel. The florist quit yesterday. I said nothing, waiting. People are saying things. About me. About how the wedding was funded. Her eyes flashed accusingly. "You promised not to talk about it." "I signed an NDA yesterday," I corrected her. "And I've only discussed it with Juliet, which was explicitly permitted in the agreement." "Well, Juliet's obviously been talking to people," I shrugged. "That's between you and her." Samantha stood up and paced my small living room. "This is my wedding, Bree. The most important day of my life. Everything was perfect, and now it's ruined. What do you want from me?" I asked simply. She stopped pacing and faced me. "I want you to fix it." I almost laughed. "Fix what exactly?" "The situation. Tell people there was a misunderstanding. Come to the wedding. Show everyone that things are fine. Between us." The audacity was breathtaking. After everything that had happened, she still saw me as the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who would set aside her own feelings to make Samantha's life easier. "No," I said quietly. "What do you mean, no?" "You got your money back. Dad wrote his stupid letter. What more do you want?" I studied my sister, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. The desperation in her eyes wasn't about reconciliation or remorse. It was about appearances, about salvaging her perfect day, her perfect image. "I want nothing from you, Samantha. That's the point. I'm done wanting your approval, your inclusion, your respect. I'm done trying to be the sister you never wanted me to be." Her expression hardened. "So you're just going to let my wedding be destroyed because you're still holding a grudge?" "Your wedding issues aren't about me. They're about consequences. People have made their own decisions based on what they've learned about your character. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. You've always been jealous of me. No, I said, feeling oddly calm. I've always wanted to be close to you. There's a difference. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across her face. A glimpse of the sister I'd once known, the one I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with science projects. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask I'd grown accustomed to. Fine, she said, gathering her coat. I thought you might be bigger than this, but clearly I was wrong. As she reached the door, I found myself speaking one last truth. I hope your wedding is exactly what you deserve, Samantha. Nothing more, nothing less. She left without another word, the door closing softly behind her. The day of Samantha's wedding arrived with a strange sense of unreality. I hadn't heard from my family since Samantha's visit 3 days earlier. No updates, no invitations, no further attempts to pull me back into the fold. The silence was both a relief and oddly unsettling after a lifetime of entanglement. I had decided to work a shift at the hospital, partly to keep busy, and partly because I genuinely cared about my patients. Being needed in a straightforward, uncomplicated way felt healing somehow. You seem different today, Edith, my supervisor, noted during our midday handover. More present. I smiled. I've been dealing with some family issues. They're mostly resolved now. Mostly. As resolved as they can be, I amended. Some things don't have perfect endings. Edith, who had been a nurse for over 30 years and had the wisdom to match, nodded knowingly. Families are complicated. The most important thing is that you protect your peace. Everything else is negotiable. My peace. The phrase struck me. For as long as I could remember, I had been responsible for everyone else's peace, mediating conflicts, smoothing ruffled feathers, accommodating others' needs and wants. But my own peace had always been sacrificed in the process. Not anymore. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Juliet. It's happening. Smaller than planned, but still going forward. George's parents saved the day with their country club. Connections. I wasn't surprised. The wedding had always been too important to Samantha's identity and my parents' social standing to be canceled entirely, no matter how many vendors pulled out or guests sent regrets. Are you still in the wedding party? I texted back. Yes. Someone needs to give me the real story afterward. You okay? I'm good, I replied, and meant it. Actually at work. Tell me everything tomorrow. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and continued my rounds, surprised by how little emotion I felt knowing that across town, my sister was getting married without me. There was a twinge of sadness, certainly, not for missing the event, but for the relationship that had never really existed, except in my wishful thinking. At the end of my shift, I changed out of my scrubs and headed to my car. The late afternoon, sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as I checked my phone one last time before driving home. There was a voicemail from my father, left just 30 minutes earlier. Bree? His voice sounded strained, tired. I don't know if you'll listen to this, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. The wedding just ended. It was different than what Samantha had planned. Smaller, less elaborate, but maybe better for it. He paused, and I could hear ambient noise in the background. Voices, movement, the sounds of a reception in progress. I keep thinking about what you said, about the money being for something meaningful, about honoring Grandpa's wishes. Another pause. Samantha announced something during her speech that I didn't know about beforehand. She and George are donating a significant portion of their wedding gifts to the hospital's pediatric cancer wing, in your name. I felt my breath catch. Don't know if it's enough, he continued. I don't know if anything could be, but I thought you should know. His voice softened. You would have been proud of her today, Bree. I think, maybe, in her way, she was trying to make amends. I know it doesn't erase what happened. Just call me when you're ready. If you're ever ready. I love you. The message ended, leaving me sitting in my car, stunned. Of all the ways I had imagined this day unfolding, this wasn't one of them. Samantha, making a gesture of restitution, using her wedding, the very thing that had been, the focus of all this conflict, to do something genuinely meaningful? I didn't know whether to believe it or not. It could be another manipulation, another attempt to rewrite the narrative. Or it could be genuine, a first step, however small, toward actual accountability. As I drove home, I found myself thinking about my grandfather. He had always believed in second chances, in the capacity for people to grow and change. People aren't static, Breeby, he used to tell me. We're all works in progress until the day we die. Was this progress? Or just a performance designed to rehabilitate Samantha's image among their social circle? I was still turning these questions over in my mind when I arrived home to find a large envelope leaning against my door. My name was written on it in my mother's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a note. We had the photographer take pictures of everything, including Samantha's speech. Thought you might want to see it for yourself. Mom. Curious despite myself, I went inside and plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained a video file labeled simply Speech. The footage showed a reception room at what appeared to be a country club. Smaller than the grand venue Samantha had originally planned, but elegant nevertheless. The camera focused on Samantha and George standing at the center of the room. She looked beautiful in a simpler dress than I imagined she would choose. Her hair up in a classic style. Before we continue the celebrations, Samantha was saying, champagne glass in hand, George and I have an announcement. The room quieted. Many of you know that the path to today has been complicated. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. Mistakes were made, serious ones, by me most of all. I leaned closer to the screen, barely believing what I was hearing. My sister Bree couldn't be here today, Samantha continued. And that's my fault. I made choices that hurt her deeply, choices I can't undo but that I need to acknowledge publicly. The camera panned briefly to my parents. Dad looked solemn, Mom teary-eyed. Bree has dedicated her life to helping others as a nurse at Metropolitan Hospital. She embodies the values of compassion and service that our grandfather treasured. Samantha's voice wavered slightly. To honor both her and Grandpa, George and I have decided to donate all monetary wedding gifts to the pediatric cancer wing at Metro in Bree's name. Murmurs of approval rippled through the guests. It's not enough, Samantha added. It doesn't fix what happened, but it's a start. A beginning of what I hope will be a long journey of making things right. She raised her glass. To Bree, the best of us, even when I was the worst of me. The video ended there, freezing on the image of raised glasses and Samantha's face. A face I'd known all my life but somehow looked different now, stripped of its usual confidence, showing something that looked almost like genuine remorse. I closed my laptop slowly, unsure what to feel. Skepticism warred with a reluctant hope. Was this the first genuine act of contrition from my sister? Or another performance, another manipulation? Only time would tell, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, I realized I had the luxury of time to observe, to evaluate, to decide what role, if any, my family would play in my life going forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Juliet. Just left the reception. Call me when you can. It was interesting. I smiled, knowing I would get the unvarnished truth from her. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be facing it alone or without clarity. And that, perhaps, was the most meaningful gift of all. 3 weeks after the wedding, I found myself driving along the winding road to the family cabin in the Berkshires. The autumn leaves were at their peak, brilliant reds and golds against a crisp blue sky. I hadn't planned to come here, but after my conversation with Juliet the day after the wedding, something had shifted inside me. It was genuine, she had insisted over coffee. I've known Samantha our whole lives, and I've never seen her like that. Vulnerable, accountable. No one forced her to make that speech. George looked as surprised as everyone else. People don't change overnight, I'd countered skeptically. No, they don't, Juliet had agreed. But sometimes they have moments of clarity that begin change. Whether she follows through is another question entirely. That conversation had stayed with me, circling in my thoughts as I returned to work, as I started therapy, as I began to reimagine my life without the burden of being my family's emotional caretaker. I had spoken to my father twice since the wedding, brief, careful conversations that acknowledged the harm done without attempting to sweep it aside. He had surprised me with his willingness to sit in the discomfort of accountability, without trying to rush toward forgiveness. My mother was finding it harder. Her texts still carried hints of, "Can't we just move forward?" and "Family is everything." But even she seemed to be slowly accepting that our relationship would never return to what it had been, and perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Samantha and George had left for a honeymoon in Japan immediately after the wedding. According to my father, they had indeed donated all monetary wedding gifts, over $35,000, to the hospital's pediatric wing. A beginning, not an ending. I hadn't spoken to my sister directly. That bridge, if it was ever to be rebuilt, would require more time and much more evidence of genuine change. The cabin came into view as I rounded the final bend, a solid structure of stone and timber that had weathered decades of New England seasons. According to Dad, George had signed the property over to me completely, with all liens cleared. The deed had arrived by certified mail a week after the wedding. I parked and sat for a moment, absorbing the familiar sight. This place held so many memories, summer vacations, winter holidays, weekends spent hiking with Grandpa while he shared his endless knowledge of local flora and fauna. The key was where it had always been, hidden in a fake rock by the front steps. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and wood smoke, exactly as I remembered. Dust covers draped the furniture, but otherwise, it looked untouched since my last visit 3 years earlier. I moved through the rooms slowly, reacquainting myself with the space. In the library, my grandfather's collection of Hemingway first editions still lined the shelves, preserved behind glass doors. His fishing gear hung on hooks in the mudroom, waiting for waters that would never feel his cast again. This place had been his sanctuary, his true home despite the grander house he maintained in the city. He had understood something that the rest of the family never quite grasped, that real wealth wasn't about appearances or status, but about creating spaces for genuine connection and meaningful experiences. I settled into his old leather chair by the stone fireplace and opened the letter I had been carrying with me for days, unable to decide whether to send it. It was addressed to Samantha. Dear Samantha, I received the video of your speech at the wedding. While one gesture doesn't erase years of patterns, I recognize the courage it took to acknowledge your actions publicly. The donation to the pediatric wing was meaningful, not just to me, but to children who will benefit from it. I'm writing not to offer instant forgiveness or to pretend everything is resolved, but to acknowledge that I heard you. I saw your attempt to begin making amends. These are first steps on what would necessarily be a long road. For most of our lives, I've carried the emotional burden in our relationship. I've been the one to reach out, to forgive, to understand. That imbalance cannot continue if we're ever to have a healthy relationship as adults. I need time and space to heal from the betrayal I experienced. I need to see consistent evidence that the accountability you showed at your wedding wasn't a one-time performance, but the beginning of a real change. If you're willing to do that work, not for appearances or approval, but because it's right, then, perhaps in time, we can build something new between us. Not what was, but something healthier, something balanced. This isn't an ending or a beginning. It's just where we are now, a middle place, with the path forward yet to be determined. Take care of yourself, Bree. I folded the letter and slipped it back into its envelope. I wasn't sure yet whether I would send it. Part of me felt that the ball was in Samantha's court, that after everything, she should be the one to reach out first. Another part recognized that healing wasn't about scorekeeping or pride, but about choosing the path that led toward wholeness, regardless of who took the first step. My phone buzzed with a text from Rex. Quarterly statement shows all funds restored and secure. New security protocols in place? How's the cabin? I smiled at his thoughtfulness and texted back, "Cabin is perfect. Thanks for everything, Rex." Another text came in moments later, this one from my father. "Got your message about being at the cabin. There's firewood stacked on the north side. Weather report says it might get cold tonight. Let me know if you need anything." Simple, practical information. No demands, no expectations, no guilt. Just a father looking out for his daughter's basics. Comfort. It was a small thing, but it felt like a beginning. As dusk fell, I built a fire in the hearth using the wood my father had mentioned. The flames caught quickly, casting warm light across the room. I made a simple dinner from supplies I'd brought and ate at the rustic dining table, watching darkness settle over the mountains through the picture window. Later, wrapped in one of Grandpa's old cardigans, I stepped onto the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky in magnificent profusion, far from city lights. I remembered standing in this same spot as a child, Grandpa's hand on my shoulder as he taught me the constellations, explaining how sailors had once used them to find their way home. "The stars don't change, Breeby," he had told me. "We're the ones who move, who see them from different angles. But they're constant, reliable. When you're lost, look up. They'll help you find your bearings." I looked up now, finding the familiar patterns: Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, Orion's Belt. My personal constellations had shifted dramatically in the past weeks. Relationships I had thought were fixed had revealed themselves to be fluid, capable of both terrible betrayal and surprising growth. But I was finding my bearings, not through others' expectations or demands, but through my own inner compass, my own sense of what was right and worthy and true. I took out my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, sent a text to Samantha. "I'm at the cabin. Your speech at the wedding was unexpected. When you're back from Japan, we should talk. Not to fix everything, but to start somewhere new." Then I put the phone away, not waiting for a response. Whatever came next, reconciliation, separation, or something in between, I would face it on my own terms, with clear eyes and an open heart. No longer the family charity case, but a woman standing firmly in her own worth. Grandpa would have been proud. Spring arrived in the Berkshires with a gentle persistence, melting the last patches of snow and coaxing green shoots from the earth. I stood on the cabin's newly restored deck, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The past 6 months had transformed not just the cabin, but my entire life. After that first weekend in the cabin, I'd returned to the city. With a clarity I hadn't felt in years, I submitted my resignation at Metropolitan Hospital and accepted a position at the Regional Medical Center just 30 minutes from the cabin. The role came with more responsibility, better hours, and the chance to help build a new community health program. The cabin itself had evolved from a weekend retreat to my permanent home. With my inheritance funds secure, I'd undertaken thoughtful renovations, updating the heating system, expanding the kitchen, adding a small sunroom where I could watch the seasons change. But I'd been careful to preserve the soul of the place, the elements that had made it special to my grandfather. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder: lunch with Dad, 1 p.m. Our monthly meeting, always at the same small restaurant halfway between his home and mine. These lunches had become a ritual of cautious reconnection, a space where we were learning to relate to each other as adults with boundaries rather than roles to fulfill. My relationship with my mother was evolving more slowly. She still struggled with the new dynamics, still occasionally slipped into patterns of emotional manipulation. But she was trying, in her way. We spoke on the phone every couple of weeks, shorter conversations than before, but more honest ones. And Samantha? That was the most complicated story of all. Her response to my text from the cabin had come 3 days later. Back next week. Yes, let's talk. That first conversation had been awkward, stilted, filled with long pauses and careful words. But it had happened, and that itself was something new, a dialogue rather than a performance, both of us feeling our way toward authenticity. The donation to the pediatric wing had indeed been genuine. She had followed up with a visit to the hospital, touring the facilities without cameras or social media posts to document her generosity. According to the program director, she had asked thoughtful questions about the children's needs and the challenges the staff faced. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Our relationship remained distant, more acquaintances than sisters. But the hostility had faded, replaced by something that wasn't quite warmth, but wasn't animosity either. A neutral space with potential for growth. George had proven to be an unexpected ally in the healing process. He had called me a month after. They returned from Japan, asking if we could meet for coffee. I want you to know I'm encouraging Samantha to continue making amends, he had told me over steaming mugs at a quiet cafe. Not just to you, but to herself. We're in couples counseling, and she's seeing someone individually as well. That's surprising, I had admitted. He had smiled ruefully. The woman I fell in love with is still in there, beneath the entitlement and the need for approval. I'm betting on her finding her way back to herself. It's a work in progress. Work. In progress. My grandfather's phrase now echoed by others. Perhaps that was all any of us could hope to be. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Juliet. Still on for hiking tomorrow? Paul's friend Nick is joining us. He's an ER doctor at your hospital. Single. Loves dogs. Just saying. Smiled and texted back. Subtle matchmaking noted. Yes, still on. Juliet remained my closest friend. Our bond strengthened rather than damaged by all that had happened. She had been right about Samantha's wedding speech marking a potential turning point, though the path since then had been neither straight nor easy. As I prepared to leave for lunch with my father, I paused in the library, now my home office. Grandpa's collection of Hemingway first editions gleamed behind glass, preserved but not forgotten. Beside them stood newer volumes, medical journals, local history, gardening guides for the vegetable patch I'd started behind the cabin, on the E. Desk sat a small wooden box, hand-carved with a mountain scene. It had arrived 2 months ago with a note from Samantha. Found this in a shop in Kyoto. Reminded me of the cabin and Grandpa's stories about climbing in his youth. No strings attached. Just thought you might like it. The box now held the seeds. I was collecting for next year's garden. A practical use for a beautiful object. A small gesture transformed into something productive. My phone rang as I gathered my keys and bag. An unfamiliar number with a local area code. Hello? Is this Bree Stewart? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes, this is Bree. Ms. Stewart? I'm calling from Berkshire Community Foundation. We've received an anonymous donation to establish a nursing scholarship in your grandfather's name. The donor specified that you should be invited to sit on the selection committee if you're willing. I sat down slowly in the desk chair, surprised. Did the donor leave any message? Just that the scholarship should support students committed to rural healthcare and community service. They mentioned your grandfather believed in investing in people who would make a meaningful difference. After the call ended, I sat for a long moment, turning over possibilities in my mind. The donation could have come from my father, trying to honor both me and Grandpa. It might have been Samantha, continuing her efforts at making amends in a way that reflected actual thought about what would matter to me. It could even have been George, working behind the scenes to facilitate healing. The source almost didn't matter. What mattered was that someone had chosen to create something meaningful from the wreckage of what had happened, just as I had been doing with my own life. As I drove to meet my father, the mountains rose around me, solid and enduring. I thought about the journey of the past 6 months, about loss and betrayal and unexpected growth, about the family I had been born into and the connections I was now choosing to nurture or release. The restaurant came into view, a converted farmhouse with a wide porch and window boxes waiting for summer flowers. My father's car was already in the parking lot. He was always early, a habit I'd inherited. Before getting out of my car, I took a moment to center myself. These lunches weren't always easy, but they were necessary, part of the new landscape I was carefully mapping, one conversation at a time. My phone buzzed with one last message before I headed inside. It was from Rex, who had indeed lost his position at the financial firm, but had started his own practice, taking me as his first client. Just checked in on your accounts. Everything looks solid. That donation you asked about went through yesterday. The community health program should receive the funds by end of week. I smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction. Part of my inheritance was now funding expanded mental health services for rural families, exactly the kind of meaningful investment my grandfather had envisioned. Not a splashy showcase, but a quiet, sustained effort to improve lives that often went overlooked. As I walked into the restaurant, I caught sight of my father already seated by the window. He looked up, saw me, and his face softened with a tentative smile. Not the confident grin he'd once worn like armor, but something more genuine, more earned. I smiled back, equally measured. We were finding our way back to each other, step by careful step. Not as we had been, but as we might become. The family charity case was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who set her boundaries, who chose connection based on respect rather than obligation. This wasn't an ending or a beginning. It was simply where I was now, alive to possibility, anchored in self-respect, open to whatever came next. And that, I realized as I took my seat across from my father, was more than enough. I'm just saying the north side would get better light. For the clinic windows, Nick argued good-naturedly as we hiked along the ridge trail, patients respond better to natural light. But the south side is more accessible from the main road, I countered. And we'd save on the foundation work with the existing structure. A year had passed since I'd discovered my sister's theft, and life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. Nick, Juliet's casual introduction, had become first a colleague, then a friend, and now something more. As fellow healthcare professionals, we shared a passion for improving rural medical access, which had led to our current friendly debate about the community clinic we were planning. The Ridge Trail offered spectacular views of the valley below, now lush with summer greenery. The land adjacent to my cabin had come up for sale 3 months ago, and with some of my restored inheritance, I'd purchased it with plans to establish a small wellness center for the underserved community. You know, Nick said, pausing to take a drink from his water bottle. Most people would have used that money for a vacation home in the Bahamas or something. I smiled. I'm not most people. Trust me, I've noticed. His warm glance made me blush slightly, even after 5 months of dating. We continued along the trail, the conversation flowing easily between clinic plans and more personal matters. That was the thing about Nick. Talking with him never felt like work. He carried none of the emotional baggage that had defined my family relationships for so long. As we rounded the bend toward the summit, my phone buzzed. Normally, I wouldn't check messages during a hike, but I was on call for the hospital this weekend. Go ahead, Nick encouraged. I'll scout the view ahead. It wasn't the hospital, but a text from Samantha. Just wanted to say happy anniversary. Not the wedding, the other thing. I know today might be difficult. I'm still sorry, still working on it. I stared at the screen, surprised. I hadn't consciously registered the date, but she was right. It had been exactly 1 year since I'd discovered the missing money. The fact that she remembered, that she acknowledged it without excuses, felt significant. Our relationship had evolved into something I would describe as cautiously cordial. We weren't close, might never be. But the open hostility had given way to something resembling mutual respect. Her therapy seemed to be helping. She'd developed self-awareness I'd never seen in her before. Everything okay? Nick asked, returning. To my side, yeah, I said, showing him the text. Just unexpected. He knew the whole story. I'd shared it with him early on, wanting complete honesty about the family dynamics he might be walking into. His response had been refreshingly straightforward. Families are complicated. What matters is how you've handled it. Are you going to respond? He asked now. I considered it, then typed, thanks for remembering. I'm actually doing great today. Hiking with Nick, planning the clinic. Life works out in unexpected ways. Simple, honest, neither coldly dismissive nor falsely warm. A reflection of where we stood. As we reached the summit, I turned off my phone and tucked it away. The panorama before us was breathtaking, mountains rolling toward the horizon, the small town nestled in the valley, my cabin and the future clinic site visible as tiny specks in the distance. Worth the climb? Nick asked, slipping his arm around my waist. Definitely. We sat on a flat rock, sharing trail mix and the comfortable silence of people who don't need to fill every moment with words. After a while, Nick said, Your grandfather would be proud, you know. Not just of the clinic, but of how you've handled everything. I think so too, I said quietly. He always told me that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you get back up. In the years since discovering Samantha's betrayal, I'd fallen, gotten back up, and built something new. The initial shock and pain had evolved into unexpected growth. I'd left behind a life built around accommodating others' needs and created one centered on my own values and strengths. My family was still part of that life, but on entirely new terms. Dad and I had reached a tentative peace, our monthly lunches, now supplemented by occasional collaborative projects for the clinic. Mom was still Mom, but I'd learned to set firmer boundaries while still showing care. Samantha and I maintained a careful distance that worked for both of us. But what surprised me most was how much life I'd built beyond my family. Meaningful work, the clinic project, friendships that nurtured rather than drained me. And now Nick, with his steady presence and genuine partnership. Penny for your thoughts? He asked as we gathered our things to head back down. Just reflecting on how sometimes the worst things lead to the best changes. I shouldered my backpack. A year ago, I would never have imagined being here, doing this, with you. Regrets? I looked out once more at the vast landscape, then back to him. Not a single one. As we started down the trail, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The woman, who had once been dismissed as the family charity case, had found something far more valuable than money, the courage to create a life truly her own. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Stuart Wilson Community Wellness Center was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a perfect September morning. Standing in what would soon be the reception area, surrounded by freshly painted walls and new equipment, I felt a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. 2 years had passed since that fateful discovery of my missing inheritance. In that time, the small seed of an idea had blossomed into this. A fully equipped clinic that would serve the rural communities surrounding the Berkshires, providing both physical and mental health services on a sliding fee scale. The photographers, "Here!" Nick called from the entrance. And there's already a small crowd gathering. I smoothed down my dress, professional but comfortable, chosen with care for this milestone. Is my family here yet? Your dad just pulled up. No sign of your mom or Samantha. I nodded, unsurprised. Mom had sent her regrets the previous week, citing a charity luncheon she couldn't miss. Samantha had simply said she'd try to make it, which I'd learned to interpret as probably not. It didn't diminish the day's significance. This project had never been about them. Dad entered looking slightly out of place in his business suit among the casual attire of the local attendees. Still, he'd made the effort to come, and the envelope in his hand suggested he'd brought more than just his presence. Bree? He greeted me with a tentative hug. Our physical interactions still carried a certain awkwardness. It's impressive. Really impressive. Thank you for coming. I meant it sincerely. Our relationship had settled into something that wasn't quite warm, but wasn't cold either. A respectful détente built on careful conversations and mutual efforts to avoid old patterns. I brought something, he said, handing me the envelope. From your grandfather's papers? I found it when I was cleaning out some old files. Inside was a yellowed newspaper clipping from the 1970s. The headline read, "Local Doctor Proposes Rural Health Initiative." The accompanying photo showed my grandfather, decades younger but instantly recognizable, standing on what appeared to be this very property. He wanted to build a clinic here, Dad explained. Back before he joined the bigger practice in the city, it never got off the ground. Funding issues, local politics. But he never stopped talking about it. I traced my finger over my grandfather's face in the photo, feeling a profound connection across time. You never mentioned this. I forgot about it, honestly. His dreams weren't something I paid much attention to back then. The admission carried a weight of regret. I was focused on different measures of success. The honesty in his voice touched me. This was part of our new relationship. Moments of unexpected vulnerability that broke through the formal politeness. He would have loved this, I said softly. Yes, Dad agreed. But more importantly, he would have loved the person you've become. Before I could respond, Nick appeared at my side. Sorry to interrupt, but we should start soon. The mayor's getting fidgety. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. I spoke about the need for accessible health care in rural communities, about dignity in treatment regardless of ability to pay, about building resources that served real needs rather than prestige or profit. I didn't mention my family story or how the clinic came to be funded. That remained private, as it should. As I cut the ribbon stretched across the entrance, applause broke out from the assembled crowd. Local families, healthcare workers, community, leaders. These were the people who mattered most to the clinic's mission. Their presence meant more than any high-profile guests or media coverage could have. I was speaking with the mayor when I noticed a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd, Samantha, dressed with her usual elegance but standing apart, watching. Our eyes met across the distance, and after a moment's hesitation she raised her hand in a small wave. I returned the gesture, equally reserved. She didn't approach, and I didn't go to her. Some distances weren't meant to be closed completely. But her presence itself was an acknowledgement, a recognition of the significance of this day. For now, that was enough. The reception continued inside, visitors touring the facilities while enjoying refreshments provided by local businesses. I was discussing staffing needs with a potential volunteer when Nick appeared at my side again. Someone left this at the front desk for you, he said quietly, handing me a small gift bag. Inside was a beautifully crafted clock for my office, along with a card that read simply, "Time heals when we use it wisely. Congratulations on creating something that matters." A lump formed in my throat as I placed the clock back in its bag. Not because the gift itself was so meaningful, but because it represented something I hadn't expected. growth, not just from me, but from her as well. Later, as the crowd thinned and the excitement of the day began to settle, I stood in what would be my office, looking out at the mountains beyond. Nick joined me, his presence a steady comfort. "So," he said, slipping his arm around my waist, "how does it feel to come full circle?" I leaned against him, considering the question. Full circle suggested a return to the beginning, but that wasn't quite right. I hadn't returned to where I started. I'd arrived somewhere entirely new, somewhere better. "Not a circle," I said finally. "A spiral, moving forward while honoring the past." The clinic would open officially on Monday. Patients would come, lives would be changed in small but significant ways. And in that work, in that purpose, I had found my own healing. The family charity case had become the family legacy bearer, not in the way anyone had expected, but in the way that mattered most. 3 years to the day since Samantha's wedding, an envelope arrived at my cabin. Thick, cream-colored paper with my name written in elegant calligraphy. Clearly not a bill or routine correspondence. No return address, but the postmark was from Manhattan. I was sipping coffee on the deck, enjoying the morning sunshine with Nick before we both headed to the clinic for our shifts. The wellness center had been operating successfully for nearly a year now, serving over 1,000 patients from surrounding communities. Nick had officially moved in 6 months ago, and the cabin felt more like home than ever. "Fancy," he commented, eyeing the envelope as I turned it over in my hands. I opened it carefully, sliding out a formal invitation card. The front featured a simple but elegant design of intertwined olive branches. Inside, the message took me by surprise. "The Wilson Foundation for Community Health cordially invites you to our inaugural gala honoring pioneers in rural healthcare access, September 15th at the Metropolitan Club, New York City. Special recognition, Bree Stewart, founder of the Stuart Wilson Community Wellness Center, Beneath." The formal invitation was a handwritten note in Samantha's distinctive script. "Bree, George and I established this foundation 6 months ago. Your work inspired us more than you know. We'd be honored if you would accept this recognition, but understand completely if you decline. Either way, what you've built matters. Samantha." I handed the invitation to Nick, watching his expression as he read it. "The Wilson Foundation," he mused. "I've heard of them. They've been funding some innovative rural health initiatives across the Northeast. I had no idea it was your sister and her husband." "Neither did I admitted, still processing the surprise. I hadn't seen Samantha in person since the clinic opening. Our communications remained minimal. Occasional texts on birthdays or holidays. A brief call when our father had a health scare last winter. Not estranged exactly, but certainly not close. I hadn't known she and George had started a foundation, let alone one focused on healthcare access, the very cause I'd dedicated my life to. "Are you going to go?" Nick asked, refilling his coffee cup. I stared out at the mountains, considering the question. The old Bree would have analyzed every possible motive behind the invitation, looked for hidden agendas or subtle manipulations. The woman I'd become was more direct. "I think I'll call her," I decided. "Hear her out." Later that afternoon, between patient appointments, I stepped into my office and dialed Samantha's number. She answered on the second ring. "Bree," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "You got the invitation." I did. It was unexpected. Good. Unexpected or awkward unexpected? There was a hint of the old Samantha in the question, direct, a little challenging, but the tone was different. Less defensive, more self-aware. Honestly, both. I settled into my office chair. "I didn't know you'd started a foundation." "We've kept it fairly low-key so far," she explained. "George handles most of the administrative side. I've been focused on research, identifying communities with the greatest needs and the programs making actual differences." Like the clinic? Among others, yes. But your model is special. The integration of physical and mental health services, the sliding scale approach, the community engagement. We've been studying it as a potential template for other rural areas. I found myself at a loss for words. The idea that Samantha, who had once dismissed my career as boring and uninspired, was now not only acknowledging my work, but holding it up as exemplary felt surreal. Why healthcare? I finally asked. Of all the causes you could have chosen, there was a pause before she answered. That day at your clinic opening, I saw something I'd never really understood before. Purpose. Real purpose, not just achievement. Or status. It made me look at my own life differently. Another pause. And maybe I wanted to make amends in a way that actually mattered, not just with words or gestures. The honesty in her voice resonated with me. People could change, not overnight, not completely but meaningfully. About the gala, she continued, we understand if it's not your thing. Public recognition, Manhattan social events. I know that's never been what drives you. But the Foundation's work is legitimate, Bree. The recognition is deserved. And maybe... She hesitated. Maybe it would be good to see each other in a context that's about building something positive rather than rehashing the past. I found myself nodding, though she couldn't see it. I'll think about it. And Samantha? Thank you for the invitation. It means something, regardless of whether I attend. That's fair, she acknowledged. The door is open, no pressure. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the conversation. The journey from family charity case to someone whose work was being recognized and replicated felt redemptive in ways I hadn't anticipated. Nick knocked gently on my office door. Mrs. Caldwell is ready in exam room 2. Everything okay? Smiled at him. This partner who had supported me through every step of building our shared vision. Yes. Actually, I think we might be going to New York next month. How do you feel about black tie events? His eyebrows raised in surprise, but he smiled back. If you're there, I'm in. As I rose to see my next patient, I felt a sense of completion. That had nothing to do with forgetting the past and everything to do with transcending it. Life moved forward, not in perfect resolutions, but in unexpected invitations to new chapters, if we were brave enough to open them. The Metropolitan Club glittered with chandeliers and polished marble as Nick and I made our way through the entrance. I smoothed down my midnight blue gown, borrowed from Juliet, who'd insisted it was perfect for making an entrance without looking like you're trying to make an entrance. Nick looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. Remind me how a small-town doctor and a rural nurse ended up at a Manhattan Society event, he whispered as we handed our invitation to the attendant. Life's weird that way, I replied with a small smile. The ballroom was elegantly decorated with subtle medical motifs, caduceus symbols incorporated into floral arrangements, table centerpieces featuring miniature replicas of rural clinics. Tasteful rather than ostentatious, which surprised me given Samantha's previous preferences. We were examining the silent auction items, all proceeds benefiting healthcare initiatives in underserved communities, when I heard my name. Bree, you came! My father approached, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. Next to him stood my mother, elegant in a conservative black dress. We weren't sure you would, Mom added, giving me a brief hug that felt less awkward than our embraces. Usually did. Honestly, I wasn't sure either, I admitted. But the Foundation's work is impressive. It is, Dad agreed. Samantha has surprised all of us, I think. There was a genuine note of pride in his voice. Not the performative approval he'd always showered on Samantha's superficial achievements, but something deeper, more authentic. It struck me that perhaps I wasn't the only one who had grown in the years since our family fracture. Have you seen her yet? Mom asked. Not yet. We just arrived. She's been asking the staff every 5 minutes if you were here, Dad said with a small smile. She's more nervous about this than her own wedding. Before I could respond, the crowd parted slightly, and there was Samantha, walking toward us with George beside her. She wore a simple but elegant emerald gown, her hair pulled back in a sleek knot. What struck me most was her expression, not the practiced social smile I'd grown up with, but something more tentative, almost vulnerable. "You made it," she said when she reached us, her voice carefully neutral. "The clinic's work is worth supporting," I replied, equally measured. We regarded each other for a moment, these new versions of ourselves still finding our footing. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. "It means a lot." The sincerity in her voice broke through something in me. The Foundation's focus on rural healthcare, it's meaningful work, Samantha. I'm genuinely impressed. Her face softened. "Would you like to see what we've been doing? We have a display set up near the stage." Nick squeezed my hand encouragingly. "I'll grab us some drinks. Take your time." As Samantha led me through the crowd, several people stopped us to introduce themselves. Healthcare executives, philanthropists, even a state senator. She handled each interaction with grace but kept the conversations brief. "They all want to meet you," she explained as we continued walking. "Your clinic model has generated quite a buzz in healthcare circles." The display was comprehensive. Maps, showing healthcare deserts across rural America, statistics on access disparities, and photos of successful initiatives the Foundation had supported. Among them was a large image of our clinic on opening day, me cutting the ribbon with community members gathered around. George was skeptical at first, Samantha admitted, standing beside me. He thought I was just trying to ease my guilt. And maybe that was part of it initially. And now? Now it's become something else entirely. Her eyes lit up with an enthusiasm I'd only ever seen her direct toward material acquisitions or social climbing. "Did you know there are over 20 million Americans who have to travel more than 30 minutes to reach basic health care? Or that rural hospitals have been closing at a rate of about 30 per year?" "I do know," I said quietly. "It's why we built the clinic," she nodded. "I've learned so much in the past year, about needs I never saw before, about what actually matters." She turned to face me directly. "You tried to tell me, in your way. I just wasn't ready to hear it." "People change when they're ready, not when others want them to," I offered. "Some wisdom from one of your patients?" "From Grandpa, actually." A genuine smile spread across her face. "Of course it was." We stood there for a moment, not quite friends, no longer enemies, but perhaps something else. Two women who had taken very different paths to eventually arrive at a shared understanding. The program would be starting soon. As we made our way back through the crowd, Samantha said, "The recognition tonight, it's not just for the clinic's model or your medical work. Oh, it's for having the courage to build something meaningful when it would have been easier to just go along with what everyone expected." She met my eyes. "For showing that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean standing alone." The words settled between us, an acknowledgement of a journey neither of us could have predicted. "When they call you up to accept the award," she added, "I hope you'll remember that you earned this, not just the recognition, but the life you've built, the respect you're receiving." As we rejoined our family and Nick, I felt an unexpected sense of completion. Not because everything was perfect or all wounds were healed, but because we had all, in our own ways, found paths forward that honored truth rather than appearances. The family charity case had become a healthcare pioneer. And perhaps more importantly, I had become fully myself. And it is with great pride that we present this year's Rural Healthcare Innovation Award to Bree Stewart, whose visionary approach has created a model being implemented in communities across the country. The applause washed over me as I rose from my seat and made my way to the stage. From the podium, I could see Nick beaming proudly, my parents sitting with unusual stillness, and Samantha, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. I hadn't prepared a formal speech, believing until the last moment that something would prevent this unlikely scenario from unfolding. But as I stood before the crowd of healthcare professionals, philanthropists, and community advocates, the words came naturally. 3 years ago, I discovered that my inheritance, money my grandfather left specifically for me to build something meaningful, had been taken without my knowledge. I began, feeling a ripple of surprise move through the audience. This wasn't the typical opening for an acceptance speech. I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone or to dwell on past hurts. I'm sharing it because sometimes our greatest setbacks can lead to our most important discoveries. My eyes found Samantha's in the crowd. She gave me a small nod of permission to continue. That painful experience forced me to confront questions I'd been avoiding my entire life. Who was I beyond my family's expectations? What did I truly value? What would something meaningful actually look like? I gestured to the images of the clinic projected on the screen behind me. The Stuart Wilson Community Wellness Center wasn't born from abundant resources or perfect circumstances. It emerged from difficulty, from having to fight for what was rightfully mine, and then choosing to use it in a way that honored not just my grandfather's wishes, but my own deepest values. The room had fallen completely silent. Rural healthcare isn't glamorous. It doesn't make headlines or generate enormous profits, but it saves lives, restores dignity, and strengthens communities that are too often overlooked. Every day at our clinic, I see the difference that access makes. The child with asthma who can breathe easier, the farmer who can manage his diabetes without driving 2 hours each way, the young mother receiving mental health support without stigma or judgment. I paused, gathering my thoughts. What I've learned over these past years is that meaningful change rarely follows a straight path. It zigzags, doubles back, sometimes collapses entirely before finding a new direction. The same is true of relationships, of families, of our understanding of ourselves. My gaze swept across the room, taking in Nick, my parents, and finally resting on Samantha. The Wilson Foundation's work exemplifies this truth. What began as one journey has transformed into something greater, something that will touch thousands of lives. I'm honored to accept this award, not just for myself or our clinic team, but for every person who has found their own way to convert challenge into purpose. As I returned to my seat, the applause felt different than any I'd experienced before. Not polite acknowledgement or obligatory recognition, but genuine appreciation for the truth of what I'd shared. Later, as the formal program concluded and guests mingled with drinks and desserts, Samantha approached me alone. "That was quite a speech," she said, her voice deliberately light. "Too honest?" "No." She shook her head slowly. "Exactly honest enough." We moved toward a quieter corner, away from the main crowd. "I've been thinking about Grandpa a lot lately," she said, watching the room. "About why he left the money to you specifically. I used to think it was because he felt sorry for you or because he didn't think I needed it. And now? Now I think he saw something in you that the rest of us missed. Something in me too, maybe. But I wasn't ready to access it yet." She turned to face me directly. "He knew you'd use it for exactly this. Something that helped others, that built community, that mattered beyond the moment." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I wish he could see it." "I think he can," she said simply. We stood together in companionable silence, these new versions of ourselves, neither the adoring little sister and dismissive older one, nor the victim and perpetrator, but two women who had each found their way to something authentic. Nick appeared at my side with my wrap. "The car's ready whenever you are," he said, sensing the moment between us. "We're staying in the city tomorrow," I told Samantha. "Maybe we could have lunch? There's a new clinic in Brooklyn I wanted to visit. Might be a good partnership opportunity for the foundation." "I'd like that," she replied, and I could see she meant it. As Nick and I made our way out of the grand ballroom, he squeezed my hand. So, from family charity case to award-winning healthcare innovator, quite a journey. I smiled, thinking of all the twists and turns that had led to this moment. The strangest part is that none of it would have happened if they hadn't taken that money. Life's funny that way, he said, echoing my words from earlier. Outside, Manhattan glittered around us, a world away from the quiet mountains where I'd built my home. Yet I felt grounded, centered, clear about who I was and what mattered most. The inheritance my grandfather left had been far more than money. It had been the catalyst for discovering my own strength, for building a life that reflected my true values, for finding partnership based on mutual respect rather than obligation, Our car arrived. I took one last look at the elegant building behind us. If someone had told me 3 years ago that my sister's theft would eventually lead to this moment, I would never have believed them. Yet here we were, not at an ending, but at another beginning. The family charity case had become the family trailblazer, and that, perhaps, was the most meaningful legacy of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.